Ten Commandments. Hooray. Last week we had an introduction to the Ten Commandments. The introduction was, at its core, that the Ten Commandments were put in place by God for his people. But they're not rules. They were rules, but they were rules as translated by men. Initially, they weren't rules. If we read through the Ten Commandments, and I read through them last week, you can find them in Exodus chapter 20. They were given in separate statements that all kind of flowed into one another. God pulled Moses from the folk down at the base of Mount Sinai, up to the top of Mount Sinai where he'd hang out with him. And this is the first time that God gave his people anything. It's the first time that God talked to the folks, to Israel, right? Up until then, he was talking to Moses and telling Moses what to do for the people. Before then, he would talk to Abraham and tell Abraham what to do for the people. And several different people. But he never actually said, okay, go tell this to my folks. This is what I'm saying to the Israel. This is what I'm saying to the Hebrew. This is what I'm saying to God's people. He never said that up until now. Moses was sent with a singular thought in mind. He wasn't told how to do there. He wasn't told how to get there. He wasn't told how things should be handled or what things should be handled or should not be handled. He was told one statement. He said, go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. That was it. God had a plan for what was going on, but that's all that Moses knew. Right? Following me? That's all that Moses had. He had that one thing. He didn't know how to get to the end. He just had the end. The end is to go and get the folks out of Egypt. And while you're going to get them out of Egypt, just by saying, let my people go. Right? To Pharaoh. God intentionally made it difficult for Moses. It was going to be hard enough, but God said, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. And through that, I'll be glorified. Right? So, he made it difficult so that everybody could see what he wanted done. Follow me? So he pulls these folks out of Egypt. He gets them out of there. And along with them come several different mixtures of people. And you have your three basic folks. Your first person were the people that were absolutely and 100% ready to follow God. They knew that this was going to happen. It had been a long time. They were ready for it to come out. Everything was supposed to happen this way, and it's supposed to have been happening this way for a good long time, so they're ready to do whatever God tells them to do, blindly. Whatever he says, I'm doing it, whether it's going to hurt or not, right? The other end of the folks were the people that came out with Egypt. Those are what do we call them? Folks that come out, that follow good season, right?
Oh, the fair weather.
Fair weather, there we go. The fair weather followers. The ones that followed Moses because they saw what was going on. Like, oh, I see which team is winning. I'm going to hang out with these guys. Right? When it was good for them, when at that time, when Pharaoh and the Egyptians were the ones that were suffering, it was like, yeah, I'm not going to spend time with the Egyptians anymore. Everything is going south for them. Right? With them wanting things to be comfortable, they had almost the exact opposite intentions as the ones that were following God had. They were just out there because it was easy for them. You had the ones that were following Moses, were following God's teaching, and you had the ones that were like, all right, we're out in the wilderness, they ain't got no milk, no water, there's no cucumbers or leeks, which is what they actually said. We're kind of tired of this, I'm ready to go back to Egypt. But I'd rather live as a slave and eat than die of starvation out in the wilderness. It's pretty much what they were getting at, right? So you had those two people. And the third group of folks were the ones that were in the middle. The ones that were not really sure which way to go. And those were the ones after which Moses was constantly fighting. He was always trying to show them what was going on. Because you constantly have these guys who are naysayers, like, look, man, when we were worshiping idols, when we were hanging out in Egypt, sure we were getting beat, but at least we weren't going to starve to death. And over here, you had the folks that were saying, you can't see what's going on, you just have to trust him. And it's a lot like politics. You have the people who are just bent and they're going to be Democrat to the day they die, and people who are just, no matter what you say, are going to stay Republican until the day they die. The people who are trying to win votes for either side are not focusing on those people. You don't spend all your money and time and effort on trying to turn someone who's Democrat to a Republican or someone who's Republican to a Democrat. You got to aim at the people that are in the middle. You try to aim at the folks that really don't know what's going on here. And then you can win them over. That's what took 40 years. That's what took 2 generations to weed out. It took 2 generations to weed those ones out and finally win everybody over after the naysayers had gone on, had died by the wayside, so to speak. It's passed on from age for the most part, right? Had died off. So, this is a very tumultuous time for the Egyptians, rather for the Hebrew, for God's people. It was a time of war. Not only was God. You gotta go out there.
Yep.
Reaches in the back seat too. If you want to grab that. So, not only did he have all of that stuff going on under there with these people not really wanting to listen, but he also had the fact that it was a time of war. It was a difficult time for the Egyptians, or for the Hebrew, because they're constantly being pursued by the Egyptians. Not only that, but they were getting ready to go over the River Jordan, and there they were just going to be a constant war as well. So the 10 Commandments were set up in a manner that the people of God could have a practical means of righteousness. That's the way I like to describe it. They were given these laws, they were given these statements so that they could still be righteous in God's eyes, but they could still live. This is a very tumultuous time, so imagine a ship at sea. A ship without a captain is going to sink. These rules were put in place and were very stringent because there needed to be that structure in this wartime. You can't play around when there's something serious going on. The rules change. But God didn't sit down and didn't tell Moses when he came in. He didn't say to Moses when he went up to Mount Sinai, "Okay, Moses, rule number 1, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Rule number 2, thou shalt not worship graven images. Rule number 3, blah, 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 blah. Okay, at the bottom of this piece of stone, I need you to signature and date. And at the bottom of this one, I need you to initial and date." It wasn't a contract between God and his people, right? There were a means by which you can live. They were a means by which you could live righteously. I'm losing my train of thought. No, it's not your fault. There were means by which the people of God could live righteously, but they weren't set up to be commandments. Yeah, what's that?
Obedient with freedom?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, we learned last week that rule number 1 was what we called an axiom, right? Rule number 1, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt where you were slaves. You must not have any other gods before me, right? That wasn't him saying, you get nothing but me. That was the breakdown of the commandment was love. Love God with all your mind, all your heart, all your soul, right? That's the real one. And what that does is that sets up a level of priority in our lives. And all of the rest of the commandments follow that one commandment. You guys remember that? Right? Y'all that were here? We learned to have priority on our lives, and it was based off of that single commandment. To put something in front of yourself so that you can answer to an absolute truth. Knowing that there's something above you gets you to live in a life that is a credit to yourself. When you decide that there isn't a God, when you decide that there isn't something to whom you answer, then you're at free will to do whatever. There's a rule that says that you shouldn't kill someone. In all societies, you're not supposed to murder another person, right? that doesn't mean that you can't do it. There's nothing stopping you from going out and killing someone. The fact is that we're weary of the repercussions of doing so, right? So society has put up something to which we can hold ourselves. You're not supposed to do that because of the repercussions. And in us, we learned from this first rule that we had to set up an absolute truth, something to which we can hold ourselves to a standard to which we can hold ourselves, so that we can live a better life, not for ourselves, right? So we're moving on to number 2. Number 2 happens at Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. If y'all want to come up there with me, you are welcome to open your Bibles. Chapter 20, verse 4. Alright, so I'm actually getting into it now. That was just a quick review. Super quick. Super quick. Hour-long message that I heard last time. It was a good time too, I enjoyed it.
Fast.
Ready? So, Exodus 20, chapter 4. Now, before I do this, does anybody know the second commandment? Just off the top of your head.
Because we didn't just read it.
Yeah. Well, sure. Okay, well, what was it? Just give me the quick, does anybody have those things like Mom used to have, or the pastor has them? My mom has them when I was growing up. They were sitting on the wall, and it was a piece of wood, like a plaque, and it had 2 pieces of real thin metal, and they were etched out in the shape of stones, and it was tacked to the wood, and it said the 10 Commandments, and there were 2 stone tablet-looking things. Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So do you guys remember what that one said about number 2, about graven images? What did it say?
Carved.
Thou shalt not. Right, exactly. You did, or what did it
My
say?
grandma said don't worship idols.
Yeah, do not worship idols, yes. And she was
Thou
Catholic.
shalt not have any graven images before.
Yeah, thou shalt not worship graven images. Thou shalt not worship idols. That's right. It was a single sentence, a single statement, and it said, rule number 1. Goodness. How did they word it? Yeah, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Rule number 2, thou shalt not worship graven images. Rule number 3, right? And it was a single sentence, and it said, thou shalt not worship graven images, and there wasn't really a relaxed version of it. There wasn't a way to interpret it, right? It wasn't like in laws today, you have the base law in a single sentence, and then there's an interpretation, and all the interpretation is, if you guys, like Jermaine, a dear friend of mine, who's studying to be a police officer, and I got to read through some of his books about traffic violation. The traffic violation in Michigan is like that thick. It's a book that they have to carry around with them everywhere. And they have to memorize certain parts of it and most of it eventually. And you have to be able to say, okay, this line, this paragraph, this rule, subsection A of Rule 214, Part B, says that you actually can turn left onto a one-way so long as, and they have to, there's every single if possibility on there so that there's no way around it, right? Yeah, insurance policies. Yeah, a contract. Any contract, you have to put a bunch of stuff in there. That's how it was, right? And that's how it's seen, too. It's seen as a single contract, a thing where there's no real way about it. Somewhere where somebody can have a graven image. Someone can have anything. And you can pull up this contract and you can put your finger on it and say, okay, according to this right here, you're doing it wrong. So you got to go, right? That's how a contract is set up. According to this right here, these are the consequences. Yeah? Well, let's read this. Let's read Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. You must not make, I'm reading out of the New Century Version. You must not make for yourselves an idol that looks like anything in the sky above or on the earth below or in the water below the land. You must not worship or serve any idol, because I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. If you hate me, I will punish your children, even to your grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But I show kindness to the thousands who love me and obey my commandments. That is not what that thing said in my mom's house hanging on the wall, right? Here's the ones that were up there is seen as a single statement, no graven images. Next, right? You can say it in just a few words. All of that stuff right there was not in those 10 commandments. So immediately, as we start to lose something in the translation that we've all come to know, right? There's something missing from what we had. Yeah, there's a whole book. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences in there. All different statements, right? Whereas what we have is a single statement that says, no graven images. 3 words in some cases. No graven images, and then gone. On to the next one. We're missing a lot so far. All right, so let's take a look at this again. Let's break it down a little bit more. You must not make for yourselves an idol that looks like anything in the sky above, on the earth below, or in the water below the land. Does anybody have that in the King James Version that you wouldn't mind reading?
That thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth.
Okay, so no matter how you read it, no matter how it's translated into English, we come up with the same 3 basic ideas, right? You shouldn't make any graven image. So, first thing is it sets up the idea of an idol, of an image. You must not, for me right here, it says, you must not make for yourselves an idol, right? Now, before this, when we learned the very first rule, we learned what was the very first commandment?
Don't worship any other God.
That's right. No other God before me. And we translated it as love God with everything you are.
Because he's
Everything you have, everything about you, love God. Go out of your way to love God, right? That's how we developed, that's where we got that first one. And then we said that all of that first one sets the tone for the rest of the statements in those paragraphs that God gave to Moses to give to these people, right? So, the very first one, do not make an idol for yourself, right? We learned that gods aren't necessarily other supernatural beings. A god is anything that takes over the importance and the position that the Lord God serves to facilitate in our life, right? Anything that we put in front of God. What do you like to do? Do you gamble? I enjoy it on occasion, sure. You hunt? I work and go to school constantly, all the time.
And you have your phone.
I have my phone on. I'm sorry. Could you answer that? So,
excuse me,
yes,
does that mean that you can't have an idol that looks like him?
we'll get to that.
No.
Oh,
We'll get to that. You got just a little ahead. You're reading my mind. You got into my notes. So, right, we learned that a god is anything that takes precedence over God. Man. Television, absolutely. Now, does that mean that you cannot watch television? No. Does that mean that I'm not allowed to go to school or to work? Absolutely not. Does that mean that you can't go to the places that you enjoy, spend time with your family? Because spending time with friends and family could be a god too. The issue comes into play when we allow this thing to take the time that we should be devoting to God away from God, right? I can work and I can go to school. It says to work in the Bible. In Proverbs it said, a man not work lest a man not eat. In other words, get up and get a job, otherwise you shouldn't eat, right? Go out of your way to provide for your family. That's what it says. If you're not going out of your way, then you're doing it wrong. You can't find a job? Okay, fine. Are you going out of your way? Good. That's what it's your intention, right? Your intent to go out of your way. Your intent to put your family before yourself. That's what that means. If you allow that to get in front of what you're supposed to do for God, I'm supposed to do something for God, but instead of doing that, I'm going to do this. That's when it becomes something that you should be doing. That's what hurts God's feeling. That's what takes away from what God has for us, right? So, back to that first sentence. Do not make yourselves an idol that looks like anything in the sky above, the earth below, or the water below the land, right? Don't set yourself up a god. Secondly, before that, don't make an idol, right? That word is very important. It's very key in the single sentence, in the singular thing. We have a lot of things that come into our lives. We are the compilation of a lot of things. We are our own suffering. We are our temptation. We are our joy and our peace and our happiness. A lot of things come into what we are and who we are. Our character is built of a lot of different little tiny facets, right? You guys follow me? And people were extremely complex. Even as children, you know the things that make them smile and that make them laugh and that frighten them, right? And sometimes they don't know how to express it just right, so we kind of get it out of them, make them giggle, make them make that face, right? Yeah, I love to do that with kids. I love to, like, oh, and then they start laughing. Yeah? We're very complex. So we have these things going for us already. However, in that first one, do not make for yourselves an idol. Don't go out of your way. This is even further beyond allowing something to get in the way of God. But to go out of your way to make something get in the way of God causes even more issue. Sir?
Along the lines like, okay, say I'm going to give you an example. 10 o'clock, I'm going to read my Bible for like a half hour to an hour, depending what's going on.
Sure.
And I know 10 o'clock is coming.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, let's say this hunting show comes on, and I want to watch it. And I start watching it, and I knew better. I had said I was gonna, but I didn't.
Exactly.
Is that what you thought?
Exactly. Every Sunday the pastor comes up and she says, Lord God, forgive me for the things that I've done, and forgive me even more so for the things that I don't know that I did. The things that you don't know that you've done is part of who you are. We are who we are what we are what we make it. I am what I am. That's what Popeye said, right? And nobody can take away what you are. And we all have these things inside of us. You're a mother. You have certain responsibilities. You're a father. You have certain responsibilities. You're an employee. You're a son. You're whatever you are, you have certain things in front of you. However, forgive me for those things that I don't know what I'm doing. Further than that, forgive me for those things that I just, man, I wasn't thinking. I guess I don't know what I was thinking, right? You ever get it? Yeah, you know better. You knew better than that. I told you not to do that. And you ever have that discussion with a child? My mom used to have that discussion with me all the time. You deliberately disobeyed me. I knew what those words meant when I was 6. I knew that she told me not to do something, but I did it anyways, right? That's the second part of that. Now, we're going to come back and we're going to go into this next part. Do not make for yourselves an idol that looks like anything in the sky above, or on the earth below, or in the water below the land. Right? You must not worship or serve any idol. So, before we touch on those ones, I'm going to keep on going to verse 5. You must not worship or serve any idols, because I'm the Lord, your jealous God. If you hate me, I'll punish your children unto your grandchildren, but I show kindness to the thousands who love and obey my commandments. Now, that fifth one. You must not worship or serve any idol. Right? We just set up what an idol was. We set up what an idol could be. Don't go out of your way to fall into that spot of worshiping an idol. Right? That backs up that one. Now we're going to go on to this last part of this first sentence. An idol that looks like anything in the sky above, the earth below, or in the water below the land. Now he specified very, very clearly. We live in a three-dimensional world. We live in a world that has space in front of us, to the sides of us, and above and below us, right? You can see everything around you when you turn your head in 360 degrees, right? So he specifically pointed out, do not make an idol that looks like something that you can see over here, something that you can see over here, or something that you can see underneath where you're standing. Why do you think that was? Anyway, just spit it out. Anything you got?
False direction.
False direction.
Because you can't see God.
That's what I was getting at. Okay, so, because you can't see God. Here's the thing. There are two key points in this commandment that come to us. Out of reading those four sentences, and out of understanding, thou shalt not have any graven images. Thou shalt not worship any graven images. There are actually two key points that come out of this. And the first one is faith. All right? We walk by faith and not by sight. Right? Human beings do not have the ability to perceive God. You can't see him, you can't taste him, you can't smell him, you can't touch him, and you can't hear him. Right? Physically. With the 5 senses that we have available to us, with the 5 ways that we take information in and analyze them in our head, you cannot actually use those 5 senses to see or to understand, to know that God is there. Right? This is a leap of faith. at its very, very core, you have to be able to know inside of you that something is there, even though you can't see it, smell it, taste it, feel it,
Right.
or hear it. Right? You have to believe strongly enough in the thing that we can't perceive with our earthly limitations, to require something that's tangible, something that you can see, feel, taste, touch, to require to be able to see it, to know it's there, takes away from the entire idea of God. We're being lazy at that point. If you have to worship something that you can see, then we're killing our faith. And it's by faith that we walk.
Alright.
If you need to see something in front of you to know it's there, we're no better than Thomas. When Jesus came back, he said, I'm not going to believe Jesus is here until I stick my finger in his hand. What kind of terrible thing would you say about somebody that you love and care for so much? No, he's not. Like, imagine, okay, back then that was one of the worst things that could happen, and it was seen as, especially to the Hebrew, to be executed by the Rex, by the king, by the ruler of that land was akin to, an act of God. Oh goodness, a tree fell and landed on your car, right? He was executed the other day because he did something terrible. It's kind of like a car accident nowadays. So imagine, God forbid, nothing like this would ever happen. I know this is just hypothetical, but imagine somebody came up to me and told me Benny was in a car accident. My heart would drop. Immediately, it would sink to the floor, and I would be just gut-wrenching hurt, right? And especially if they said that she had passed during this accident.
Look at that song.
Yeah, look at the car. She's on her way to the hospital. There's no way she's no way she'd survived. It's just a terrible wreck. And then somebody calls me and tells me she's alive. And then I say, unless I can touch on her head and see the blood that came out that I can see on the steering wheel, I'm not going to believe that. No, you don't say that about somebody, right? That's a terrible, terrible thing to say about someone. Even if someone who was in a coma and they're sitting there in the hospital and they're dead, brain dead for years, and it happens very, 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 very rarely, but it does happen. Somebody comes out of that coma. The first thing, so-and-so came out of the coma, you got to come see her. Make her give me a call first, and then I'll believe that she came out of this coma. No, you get up and you run, right?
Yeah.
Especially if it's someone you cared about. And they called him Master. They called him Father. They loved Jesus. But Thomas says, until I can jam my fingers in this bloody wound, I'm not going to believe it. When we need something in front of us to say that God is there, if I need to see something, if I need a cross to know that this is a church, there's something wrong with my faith. You are allowing this part of you, your mind, your intention, your rationale, the higher thinking that we have, that we've been given, to intervene with the very essence of God. At that point, there isn't a faith. There's no faith involved in if you have to see it to believe it. Faith is out the window. Faith is seeing and not, believing and not seeing. If you have to see to believe, then there is no faith. You've taken that away from them. You have effectively limited God's ability to intervene in any part in your life. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe that's why, no offense, Catholic churches are so grand and beautiful, and you walk in there and it almost takes your breath away. You're like,
Yeah.
because they're just like,
Right. Yeah.
You have things in gold, and babies, and it's like,
Angels.
this is God.
I have to. Yeah. Oh,
You
how you can't call this a church? There's no angels on the ceiling. Wait, what?
It
Hold on a second. I mean, I can paint an angel on the ceiling in my bathroom if you really want me to. That's where I poop. If you think God is there because there's angels, cool, that's fine. Come over and give me some money. No, you don't need that stuff. Not only do you not need it, by needing it, by saying you require it, by putting it in front of you, you have, like I said, effectively stopped God from being able to help you. There's no faith. Everything relies on faith. Through faith we are set free. It is by faith we are saved. Everything revolves around faith, right? Faith and love are intertwined, right? Like a braided necklace. You cannot remove one without removing the other. If you take away that faith, then you're by yourself. There may as well not be a God at that point. Until I jam my fingers in his wounds, I'm not going to believe that I can have my sins healed. Well, what if he never came by his house? I guess you go on living without anybody, right? I used to get into arguments with my old boss all the time. I'd tell him, well, this is what happened. And he'd say, well, I don't believe you. And my response was, well, I guess it's a good thing that the truth doesn't depend on what you believe. Up until a few hundred years ago, people thought that the world was flat, right? Right? It's a good thing that what people believe doesn't set what we have. We have to make sure that we understand that we cannot put we put limitations on God, rather.
Right.
Our mentality, our rationale. Yes, ma'am.
My son is somewhat special needs. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
I told him, we're going to go down to see Grandma down in Florida. He goes, Mom, how are we going to go down to Florida? I said, Bobo, I said, the world is round. Didn't anybody ever tell you that? And so my mom went and bought him the boat because he says down Florida. You know,
South, right.
And he went down.
South.
And I told him one time, go put the soap in the bathroom. So they took the bar of soap and stuck it in the toilet. They put it in the bathroom. They literally say what you think.
Yeah.
You know, they think that Selena's mother that got killed,
Mm-hmm.
when she comes out on the shows, hey, she's supposed to be dead.
Oh.
That's an actor. They don't understand that. And it's hard to explain to them God.
Yeah.
They can't understand it.
It's true. It's difficult for a lot of people to perceive. That the way that you've described is probably just description. We just have to figure out a way to say it so that they understand it. But there are some people who go out of their way to just deny it. You know? That's when it's sad. That's when it's difficult. There are some people that say, unless I have, and I don't like to pick on anybody, especially my Catholic brothers and sisters, but sometimes it's difficult when they say, all right, well, I need to go and talk to Jesus' mama before I can actually get my sins absolved. But wait, hold on. What? Did you really just put a person in front of Jesus? You can tell. I'm gonna tell your mama I knew Jesus. Wait, what? What's up?
I got a Catholic Bible from the library. I want to just, not that I'm studying it, I just want to see what they're looking at. Even in there, you can't. I still don't get the rationality of what you just said. Putting anything before God.
Right.
You know, even their own Bible doesn't say it.
That is mostly a doctrine that's put onto them, and the Jesuits were a people lived a long time ago in biblical times, and they said one of their doctrines was if you get a person when they're young, you can teach them to do anything. And that's kind of what happened to Catholics. You get them young. You get them started young. It happens anywhere, really. The child is very impressionable. And you can put onto them what you want them to feel, to think. And you can put onto them the way you even want them to start to use their brain to ration things out. And that happened at that point. When you say to a child all the time, the only way that you can have your sins forgiven is if you go into this little bitty telephone booth with this old guy behind the screen and tell him what you did, then yeah, that's it. Then they believe that. And it's the same thing with a rosary. I can't pray to God unless I have a rosary. You know what I mean? Then what's the use of having God around? Why don't you just have a rosary? Right? We take away from God. We limit God.
You ever pray one of the rosaries?
No, I've never had a
Yeah,
Catholic.
we could pray 7 times, 6 times,
Right.
5 times.
It's like an
It's
app.
not that. One person.
Exactly. Hail Mary, Mother of God, the Lord is with you. Okay, Mary was a great person. Let's be honest. Mary was a God-filled, God-fearing woman. She was something to whom we should all aspire. Imagine somebody coming down to you and putting on you this amazing, daunting task of giving birth to the Savior of everyone. And just flat out, okay, your will be done. Right? That's fantastic. That doesn't put her in front of God. Right? We still have God at its very center. So, let's move on. So, like I said, we've limited God's ability to help us. We're at that point we're alone if you have to have something in front of you. You're taking faith away from everything, right? So, what's faith? Real quick, anybody?
Substance.
Right, evidence of things not seen, the substance of things hoped for. What does that mean? That's one translation, yeah. The way I like to say it personally, and I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong, is to walk in faith is to live in the confident expectation of things that are to come. All right? To walk in faith means to let something that you can't see influence who you are. You can't see God. You can't taste Him, smell Him, hear Him, touch Him. He's not something that's in our three-dimensional world around us. He's something outside of our understanding, outside of our perception, outside of our ability to even think about what He really is. But we know He's there. And to live by faith, to have that faith inside you, means to allow that thing that we can't see, hear, taste, smell, or touch. Right? 5 senses. To allow that thing that we just cannot perceive to influence our life. You catch that? To let something that we can't perceive influence who we are, how we are, to live up to an absolute truth, to set a standard for ourselves. Yeah? That's what living by faith is.
So that is solely the biggest obstacle as Christians to sinners. Or people.
Yeah.
That's like the biggest.
That is the biggest thing. By living based on those things, we allow ourselves to get lazy.
You'll always hear people saying, "No, I believe in God, but I'm going to change. I can't have God change me because I'm me. But I believe in God."
Right.
So is that believing in God? No, it's not.
It doesn't work that way. It does not compute. Yeah. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Well, I'm a pathological liar, but you're really interesting. Right? Wait, that doesn't make sense. No, okay. So we keep on moving. That's nothing but being lazy, forcing yourself to live on sight. It allows you to be influenced by earthly pursuits. Relying on seeing something, relying on hearing something, relying on smelling, tasting, or touching something means that we're allowing the things that are confined by the rules of earth to influence who we are, right? So, what are the things that people pursue in life that aren't Christian, that aren't living a life for God?
Actually, to go back to what we just said.
Yeah.
I believe that it's not wanting the responsibility of being who you are. Or changing who you are. Or
Not wanting the responsibility.
of changing. Not wanting to be responsible to God for the way that you are.
Right.
I am the way I am, and that's the way it is.
Right. Yes, exactly. If you hold fast... Right, yeah, that. Okay, gotcha. I know what you're talking about now. Sorry, it took me a second to crunch that. Yes. You get stuck on something that's of the earth. And it keeps you stuck to the earth. Thou shalt not worship any idols that look like anything on the earth. Means that when you're looking at something that's made of earth, you're being influenced by earth, right? So if you surpass the things that are of earth, if you move outside of the things that are of earth, and you hold fast to a knowledge of an absolute truth, something bigger than you, right? Life's like a river. You got something pushing you along. You got to steer your way out of the stuff that's coming. Yeah? If you hold fast to those things, then you're ultimately more inclined to live a better life. And not just for you, but a life of compassion. If I know that there is something bigger than me, that I know it, I see it, I feel it, I taste it, even though I can't perceive it, I know it's there, and I love that thing, like I love God. I know that God is there. I see Him, I feel Him, taste Him, touch Him, smell Him, all those things, despite the fact that He's not stuck in these earthly confines. Then I live a life for Him, and by living a life for Him, I allow myself to be held to a higher standard than the people around me. I'm not influenced by earthly gain. I don't want to be a bad person. I don't want to be seeking after money. Folks, you see folks with power are folks that are constantly getting money, right? Money is the thing that rules the world right now, right? You got enough money, you can do just about whatever you want and get away with it, right? But when people see that there's something inside of you that's bigger than money, they stop and step back for a moment. They say, everybody's got a price. I give you this much money, you'll do anything you want. Money is not important to me. All of a sudden, they don't have a hold over you anymore. You're not stuck in the same confines that they are. You've changed the rules on them. You've gone above them, right? You've, what we call in the tech world, you've rebooted in single-user mode. There's something bigger than what you got at that point. Yes, ma'am?
Allowing yourself to make idols of things of the world, tangible things that we can see, hear, touch, and you said things that are within our reach with our five senses. What we do in a sense is limit ourselves to go beyond. Because in order to get to God, we have to get beyond the third heaven.
Right.
There's different steps to the different heavens.
Right.
And when we allow ourselves to want to be who we are and allow ourselves to kneel down, worship anything and everything that can be, dominated with our five senses, what we're doing literally is limiting ourselves to go beyond our five senses onto the sixth sense, which is the spirit, the realm of the spirit.
Right.
And that's what's happening.
I'm getting there. Yeah. Okay. So I'm happy that everybody's kind of jumping ahead because that means that we're all moving in the right direction. So, allowing yourselves to be held to a higher standard fills you with a life full of compassion for your fellow man, right? It keeps you above and beyond. It was like I was saying about my buddy Paul last week. People respect him. Come in and, hey, Mr. Fajardo, and they shake his hand. Hey, how you doing? How's the family? How's things going? And they don't know this man intimately, but they respect the man because he holds himself higher than what other folks hold themselves to, right? And that's easy for people to respect. So by living by faith, we hold ourselves to that. And further, by living with faith, there's room to hope. There's room to hope even for something like happiness. I talked about happiness not too long ago. Happiness isn't always right in front of us. Joy isn't always right in front of us. A lot of times, the world is a harsh place to live. Yeah? Things are tough. And holding up the world by yourself, if you got nobody left around you, if God's not there, the world's a heavy thing to hold. Right? And it crashes down at you just like that, for no reason. All the work that you put into keeping things in order just fall away from you so quickly, and you're left with nothing. You have to start all over again. But when we understand and we perceive and we look at things, something that's not there, we hold ourselves to something better. It allows us faith. It allows us to hope. It allows us to know that despite the circumstances that we see here, there's something that is better for us if we just wait it out. It is God's strongest wish for us. He can't take away your suffering, but He wishes beyond anything that you rise up and meet that suffering. And you come out with your faith intact. You come out with yourself. You come out stronger than what you were. Right? And you don't get that from worshiping idols. What's up?
I think it's better to live with hope without hope. The people who got no hope at all.
That's a harsh thing.
It's better to have hope.
Exactly. Absolutely. So, with faith, we aspire to something that we can't see and we can actually pursue. Let's go to 2 Corinthians 1:10. Second Corinthians 1, chapter 1, verse 10. This is just kind of affirm what I just mentioned. Okay. God saved us from these great dangers of death, and He will continue to save us. We have put our hope in Him, and He will save us again. Right? Hope and faith. But we go out of our way for these things, right? Now, we're going to come back to these graven images for a moment.
Can you read that in King James?
Sure. I read 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10.
Chapter 110, right?
Deliver us from so great a death, and do deliver in whom we trust, that He will yet deliver us.
Pretty much what I said, though, was a different translation. God saved us from the great dangers of death, and He will continue to save us. We have put our hope in Him, and He will save us again. Yeah? God rescues us from our own foolish emotion, from our own foolish pride, from our own mental capacity in some cases. Let's go back to chapter 20 of Exodus. Let's continue on with that. Just I want to hurry up because it's getting late. Exodus 24. So we read 4. You must not make for yourselves an idol that looks like anything above the sky, anything in the sky above, on the earth below, or in the water below the land. You must not worship or serve these idols, because I am the Lord. Say again. Chapter 20, verse 4. No problem. It's the second commandment. You must not make for yourself You must not make for yourselves an idol that looks like anything in the sky above, and the earth below, and the water below the land. You must not worship or serve any idol, because I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. If you hate me, I will punish your children, even your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. All right? Yeah, that's kind of harsh. It's true. But there is a redeeming quality. But I show kindness to thousands who love me and obey my commandments. Right? God gets hurt. It says, I'll punish the people that hate me. And I'll keep on punishing, right? God doesn't perish. He is everlasting to everlasting, right? Alpha and Omega. He will always be around. There's nothing. He was always here. He will always be here, right? Amen. That's what we got here. God gets his feelings hurt. He's a real thing. He's a real being. I can't say he's a person, because a person is a human being, but he is a real person. He's a spiritual being, right? And he does get his feelings hurt. And when it says, I'll punish your children, he doesn't mean that he's going, if you make him upset, he's going to go over and he's going to kick your kid. The choices that we make carry on from one generation to the next. And you see that in medicine all the time. The people before me had problems with heart disease, diabetes. I'm susceptible to the same issues. It's not our fault. Cody touched on this a couple of weeks ago. Right? And it's not, but it's also not for God to take away without somebody asking. Remember, our choices are our choices. At some point in our life, we have to understand that we are accountable for the things that we do. I am susceptible to heart disease and diabetes, but I don't have to live with heart disease and diabetes. I can take care of myself, right? I can go out of my way to make myself healthy, so that I don't have to worry about that. I can eat right. I can exercise, right? And it's the same thing with all the rest of the stuff that goes on in our lives. And when it comes to sin, God doesn't say, I'm going to punish you for what I'm doing. He says, I'm going to punish you. But like we said earlier, these are the really stringent rules that were given to the people of Israel because he had to understand what was going on. This was a harsh time. We're no longer under the law. That's what this is. We're under grace. So the definition has changed slightly. He was going to punish, but that's not how stringent it is anymore. Now the choices that we make fall on the rest of us. It's our responsibility to maintain those, right? If I don't want my kids to have bad credit, I have to take care of the credit that I have now and teach them how to live out of that, right? You follow me? If I don't want my kids to be ignorant and to live under the thumb of an oppressive boss, I have to teach them to understand and enjoy education so that they can use their head and be smart in the things that they want to do. You must not worship or serve idol because I'm the Lord and a jealous God. And if you hate me, I'll punish your children and your grandchildren. If you make bad choices, they will fall onto your kids, whether you want them to or not. And it'll continue to cascade in further generations. Right? Now, that's not what happened with us. And that's not to say that we're solely responsible, but we are solely responsible for where we are right now. Not our position, but how we can move forward. Right? The last one. But I show kindness to thousands who love and obey my commandments. This is the second part of this. This is the second part of this that I wanted to take away from this particular commandment. Everything on earth dies, right? Everything on earth dies. So if we stick to, let me just come back one second. Everything on earth dies.
Every sentient
Right.
being.
Yes. Every living creature, eventually, it has its seasons, right? It has its times. It's born, it lives its life, it goes away from this world. Right? Follow. Okay, let's go to 2 Corinthians 4:18. So, everything on earth has its own season, right? We're going to read this real quick. We set our eyes not on what we see, but what we cannot see. What we see will last only a short time, but what we cannot see will last forever, right? So, everything on this earth has its own season. Everything on this earth has something that has, it's going to live, it's going to die. That's just how the world is. We're all going to do it. All of our kids are going to do it. All of our grandparents have done it. All of the future generations and the passive generations are absolutely susceptible to the laws of human physics. Nobody lives forever. To put ourselves in front of an idol that's made up of something earthly puts a limitation on the idol, an earthly limitation on the idol that we're worshiping at that point. Even if you're worshiping a god, a bronze, let's say you worship a bronze calf. Cool, it's a bronze calf. Guess what? Calves go too, right? And they're also delicious. But what I'm getting at is if we worship something earthly, then we're worshiping something that's susceptible to the exact same issues that we have here on earth. We're not learning something from it because it's not a god, it's an animal, right? We learn something from Jesus because he was a god. He was a person also. He was God in flesh. So he confined himself to these earthly rules that we had so he could show us that it was how it was possible. But then he went on to something else because he is everlasting, right? One more thing. I'm trying to rush through this. Sorry, guys. So we learn, with the last thing that we have to learn from this rule, with that redemption, with that redeeming sentence at the very end, is that we have a sense of freedom in worship. When you learn, do not worship graven images, we learn, don't restrict yourself to what you see. And further, we learn that there's a freedom in not worshiping something that you see. There's a freedom in worshiping something that we don't see, right? We have a redeeming quality about us. We got two more verses. We're going to go to Galatians 4:8. Galatians 4:8.
We're coming back to Exodus.
We are not. We're done with Exodus. Next week.
You want to take your finger out of there. So that's it.
We kind of came back to it because it's the base of what I was teaching. 4:8. Galatians 4:8. So, when you worship something that's of this earth, it's confining. When you worship something that's of this earth, you're worshiping the idea of nature. You're worshiping the idea that things die. You're holding yourselves to a standard of things that live and die. Right? Galatians 4:8. We're all there? In the past, you did not know God. You were slaves to gods that were not real. But now you know God, the true God. Really, it is God who knows you. So why do you turn back to those weak and useless rulers you followed before? Do you want to be slaves of those things again? Do you still follow teachings about special days, months, seasons, and years? By worshiping an idol, by worshiping something, by looking at something, by needing something, by putting something tangible in front of God that is untangible, you're limiting yourself to those earthly things. Seasons. Everything has those seasons. Special days. You can only do this on that certain day and this on this other day. But everybody, Easter is the day. That's the day that everybody's got to go to church because it's Easter. No. You have God in your life every day. You wake up and you go to sleep, understanding that it's still there. You accept and live and have a relationship with God because God is everlasting to everlasting. God is not the thing on the cross, because the thing on the cross had its one special day that it rose up. So that means every day, 365 days a year, one of those days I'm going to be in church. Wait, no, not just one day. That isn't anything. Those are two pieces of wood that are stuck together up there, right? It's what it represents up here. You don't worship that. We understand that God did something for us, right? You don't worship a statue of Mary. You understand that there was a God that used her. You don't worship a picture of Jesus. You understand that there was something that Jesus did for us. We don't worship a cow. We don't worship a fish. We don't worship the sun or the moon or something that is tangible, because those things change. They're temperamental. God is not temperamental. He is always just. He is always loving. He is always merciful. He is always jealous. He is never quick to temper and is always patient. He is always willing to forgive us. Thank God. Right? Really, thank God. I'm telling you. Who could I use some forgiveness on occasion? So, we have to follow the understanding that one sentence, that one statement, don't worship graven images, is more than just looking at a statue. It doesn't mean don't ever worship the cow that those guys were worshiping before. It's beyond that. Don't put God into a box. Don't set him in the corner and just come back to him on occasion. Right? In those harsh times, man, in those really harsh times, where all hell is broken loose, I listen to folks like, 9/11. Oh man, where was God when that happened? Probably right where you put it. Right? Out of schools. Away from the state. Ooh, sorry about that, my bad. Right? No, it doesn't work like that. You don't put God where you want him to be. God is ever reaching out for us. He's always trying to get close to us. It's us that stop him. And it's by putting these earthly limitations on him that we find that. We have to live by faith. We have to perceive things by faith. We have to hold ourselves to an absolute truth, to a higher standard. And we have to do that. And it's a difficult thing sometimes because you can't see God. And man, is it easy to... It's just easier when you have something you can see. It really is. But the test is not to see. The test is to act like God. You can see. Live your life like God is actually standing right there. Yes, sir.
When we wanted to pray for my sister in the hospital, she had cancer. Well, we found out, the doctor came and said he didn't see no cancer, there was no cancer. And right after that, my nieces started praying rosaries and little virgin things, little
Statues of
like
Virgin
that.
Mary.
Oh man, all over, you know. Oh, so thank you with this old soul. And having that things in there. Well, that night I had a war with that night. I don't know about that. I had a war all night with that. And with all this idols, they keep coming. I keep praying. And the morning I was all, I got up early in the morning and it's too mad at this old man. I was fighting with him. I was all night. It was all war. But it was a war. I mean, they come against me, all them violence and that. That's what I seen at the hospital. And that island, that was just coming in all kinds of things that only God knows why. But I know I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and that's the only one
Right.
that I thought I just
That's very true. There's a thing where folks will pray to a saint. Oh, the patron saint of this person, you be good and talk to God for me, sort of thing. Right? Do
What's
you-
his name, George?
What's that?
Why is his name George? Oh, George.
Yeah, pray to a guy named George. Dear George, I was wondering. Yeah, no, it doesn't work like that, right? Well, folks make it work like that. In order to be sainted, you have to be put up in the Catholic Church as a person who's done something great for God. And at that point, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to say, okay, dear person who did something really cool for God, go talk to God on my behalf, right? That's teaching people that you can get into heaven, or you can get close to God by your merits. Yeah, follow me?
Yes.
That's exactly what it's saying. It's saying somebody who did something real. It's like me saying, okay, I curl. All right, I stand in front of the pearly gates. Watch till I let you into heaven. My mom's a pastor. It's not good enough. That might be good enough to get a job at your dad's pizza shop, but that's not good enough to get into heaven. You get in by how you live your life, not because of somebody else, right? We learn from that very last sentence that not only is there faith, that we have to live by faith, but we are free from the rest of we're free from the rest of the stuff that confine us to earth through our faith. Last one, Psalm 19, let's go with 44. 119:44.
Bible also says that every man is responsible for his own sin.
Right. It's true.
What was that scripture?
Psalm 119, we're going to start with 44. Actually, you know what?
Psalm 119.
Yep, let's start with 43. Let's start with 43. It's 43 through 45. Ready? Psalm 119, 43 through 45. Never keep me from speaking your truth because I depend on your fair laws. I will obey your teachings forever and ever. So I will live in freedom because I want to follow your orders. Right?
Better in the King James.
King James? I can do it in the King James.
Can I read it?
Yes, please.
It says, and take not the word of my mouth, utterly out of my mouth, for I have hope in the judgment. So shall I keep the law continually forever and ever. and I will walk at liberty for I seek thy precepts. I will walk at liberty, for I seek thy precepts. Psalms 119.
Oh.
Okay?
That's yeah.
There is a liberty in walking by faith. There is freedom in walking by faith. If we don't put God in a box, then we can live our lives free from worry, from the chance of something terrible happening, or rather the idea of continual suffering, because we don't know what's going to happen. That's the harshest thing. Somebody, Benny's mother, she's doing much better, thank God now, but she was in the hospital. And they thought she was having a heart attack. And they said, we think she's having a heart attack, we're going to run some tests. And the most difficult point of that entire part was what they didn't know was going on. Every single time, okay, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. And that doesn't give you any real substance. That doesn't take away your worry because, okay, it's not that. What is it? It's not knowing that tears folks up. It's not knowing that scares the bejesus out of you. It's not knowing that makes things that much more difficult. But if we have faith, the freedom that comes from understanding that there's something bigger than us takes away the worry of not knowing. Jeff is off training so that he can leave the country and go right into the heart of the battle. Despite what happens, I know that we're going to be okay. Right? I'm content with that. I'm happy because I trust. Right? I'm leaving out of this building when we get done with practice and I'm going home. And there are deer everywhere. And there's a chance that we could hit one. But I'm not worried about that because despite what happens, we're going to be okay. Right? If I go tomorrow, if I walk off the corner and I'll up in both ways and I get hit by a bus, I'm not going to worry about it because despite what happens, I know I'm going to be okay. You're not stuck to the same rules. Somebody can't rule you with money anymore. This is a price that it's going to take for you to do something that I want you to. People can't threaten you with death anymore. Do this, I'm going to kill you. I'm not worried about dying. I know what's happening. I know where I'm going. Do what you're going to do. Right? Living by faith frees us from the stuff that we have here on earth. Living by faith frees us from this thinking that we have that chucks us up every once in a while. Sometimes we have to let this go and not pay attention to the world around us so that we can continually move forward. That's the heart of the second commandment. That's the heart of the second statement. Thou shalt not have any graven images. Doesn't mean that cow is bad. It means you give power to what you believe. If you want to believe in a cow, by all means do what you're going to do, but it's not going to help you when you go. I believe in something that lives forever and ever. I'm going to be okay. There's freedom in that faith. All right? That's what I had for this week.